And we should separate power generation and electric grids so that so as to facilitate the competition and innovation. And also remove all the regulation that hinder the new forms of power generation. And the public debt. So now at least 95% of the government bonds are held by the Japanese, as I said. But that ratio is bound to decrease because the government borrowing is increasing and the residents' saving rate is decreasing. So sooner or later, a lot of foreigners will have will own the Japanese government debt. Then the prices will be, they're really unstable. So we should really be aware. So problems should be solved in some way. And if problem has not been solved for the next 10 years or so, we will have one of the two scenarios. One is the hyperinflation. The other one is the default. And if we have a default, the good thing is that the problem is solved. Of course, there will be no debt problem any longer. But because a huge chunk of the government debt is held by Japanese, the financial sectors will crash. So that will crash the Japanese economy. And hyperinflation, of course, that is pretty bad for economy. And also, we know that Japan has experienced the bubble, and that actually is the starting point of the Japanese recession. And we had a bubble because the money only goes to a particular sector because of the financial imperfection. So a similar thing may happen. So another bubble may occur, and then that will lead to financial crisis again. And so we should raise taxes, but when we raise taxes, we should think hard how to do it. We may actually tailor the tax profile so as to facilitate women's labor participation, for example, and also do not raise the tax, the corporate tax, to keep the competitiveness. And about the aging problem, it's very difficult to tackle, but very important, of course. And one is that to encourage women's labor participation, and of course use the older person's the knowledge, and also the open to the foreigners. And especially, I would like to talk about the opening the labor market to foreign skilled labor, not unskilled labor. Okay, Japanese competitiveness. So one problem is that the low productivities of the skilled labor, and I remember that I read newspaper articles that talks about the problems of Japanese engineers. So they are smart and they work very hard, but they don't speak English well. So they have a severe communication problem with foreign engineers. So that is actually the problem for the England FDI. So we should actually change that part. And so there are only three ways to increase the competitiveness of Japan industries. One is to increase the labor contribution, and second, to increase the capital contribution. The third, to increase the technology contribution. The capital contribution, increasing the capital contribution is difficult because of the aging problem. So we don't have a lot of savings to use for the investment. So what about labor contribution? It's similar, the same reason. So we can increase the number of the labor force, but we can increase the efficiency unit of labor force by increasing the human capital. So that is very important. And also technology, we can increase the innovation and by facilitating the accumulation of human capital. Okay, let me use one more minute, or two, or three. And what is the specific policies? To globalize the universities. So that's very important for education. And also to encourage inward FDIs. And so to increase inward FDI, it's very important to stabilize Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant because of the perception that the Tokyo can be dangerous. The many the England FDI may not come. So we should actually fix that problem. And we encourage labor inflow to facilitate innovation, especially for skilled labor, and pursue free trade. So that, basically what I'm proposing is that open the country to the world. And so about the missing middle income classes, so here's an income line, and the poor people or the unskilled labor were displaced by machines. And the relatively unskilled white-collar laborers are displaced by IT. So computers replaces a lot of occupations, and globalization of the labor market as well. So a lot of the work is outsourced to the developing countries. But rich people just benefit from all those things. So because of that, the income gap is widening. And so there are some reasons that globalization hurts Japanese workers. And in international trade, there's a famous theorem called Stoll-Samuelson theorem that says international trade will lower real wage and increase the real return to capital. So the first part is important. Well, to the capital abundant country like Japan, so international trade will lower real wage. So the losers are not the agricultural farmers, but losers are the workers. And so we should compensate. And another famous theory called the factor price equalization theorem says factor prices are equalized across trading countries if they produce the same set of goods. So if Japan engages in trade with China producing the same set of goods, the Japanese workers' wages are going to be very similar to Chinese wages. And so those are bad news to the labor. And the final bad news is the globalization. So offshoring will lower the demand for Japanese workers. So we should specialize more in the tasks, or we will specialize more in the tasks that are capital intensive and human capital intensive. And fragmentation, this is the Boeing Dreamliner. A lot of cars are produced by different countries, by different firms. So we face the reality of this globalization wave. And we are now talking about so we should actually stop the Japanese firms to go out of Japan. But if we could, if we want, we may be able to prevent that from happening. But if we do so, what happens is that that's an offshore in the global outsourcing to Chinese firms, Thai firms, and so forth. So it's just the same thing. So we should face the reality. So globalization will enhance the fragmentation. So we should actually live with this. And so what we can do is to accumulate human capital and capital to move up the product ladder. So we try to avoid factor price equalization trap. And we should actually increase the low-skilled workers' productivity more by education. In conclusion, so to raise Japan's competitiveness is very important to solve other two problems too. So the solution: let's globalize, let's study hard, and I hope we are ready to go through drastic reform such as Meiji Revolution and the one after World War II. Thank you very much.
Okay, our last speaker for this session is Professor Hirotaka Takeuchi, who is at the Harvard Business School in the Strategy Unit. He currently teaches a course in knowledge-based strategy and also teaches microeconomics of competitiveness with Professor Michael Porter. He received a BA